All right, guys, so I had a couple of quick questions for the king of multifamily, Jason. So you ready for a couple of questions, man?
Let's rock.
All right, so listen, you know what's funny? I didn't even talk about this, man. No one's ever seen me in a sports coat probably before.
I know. You look amazing. Well, you still have the black t-shirt on.
I do.
You got the belt, you got the shoes.
I'm all fancy.
Your wife's going to be super proud.
Did I put the belt on?
Yeah, that you put it on.
Yeah, it's this is only for you. I wouldn't do this for anybody else.
Okay.
So
we're classing it up around here.
just for you, man.
All right.
All right. So here's the thing, and we're smoking cigars, which you rarely ever see me smoke a cigar.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a couple of questions that I think people would love to hear your opinion on related to the apartment world. Fair enough?
Sure.
All right. So the very first question I have is this: is that in our industry, there's been this whole common thing, and you've heard me talk about this too, is like, why don't people want to service apartments? Like, is that a stupid way to think?
Well, I think you have to understand your business model, what you're good at, what you're not good at. I think it depends on if the calls are coming in, right? Or if they're reaching out to you, or if you're stopping by to see if, you want to get their business. So I think a lot of it depends on what your business model is. But to answer your question, I think it really comes down to, do you want to be in that space? Because if you do, there are probably some basic things you need to have set up prior to. You just can't walk in and say, okay, we're going to service apartments today and expect the phone to ring. I mean, there's some setup that's necessary to do it, and it's not anything out of control, but you need to understand some key terminology and understand how the property managers, run their business. That's the key part of it, right?
Yeah, I think, and I think one of the contexts that I've always seen, and I'll just call it what it is, like a lot of the nationals, right? A lot of the nationals, their sales reps look at apartments as like low-hanging fruit. And I've heard this talked about in sales meetings, but the reality is they think about them low-hanging fruit because you can walk in and just undercut the price, and they feel like they can just win that way. But the reality is that they're actually devaluing their services, which I think you would probably agree, right?
Yeah, and then again, this comes back to understanding of how these property managers and property owners and large property management companies think, right? And yeah, everyone's concerned about costs, but they're also trying to understand vacancy, occupancy, lease retentions, time to service. So if they are beating the competition by $2 or $3 a door, but they can't get there for 10 days, what good is that, right? I mean, it really doesn't make sense. So it's understanding how the property manager wants the service to be handled, how fast you can get there, the information that you're sharing with them after the service is done, right? So even if you are a big national company and you can get out there relatively quick, but if you're not sharing that data with them that helps them get to where they need that unit or that property, the price is irrelevant.
Yeah. So I think what you're really saying here is that you have to care about the customer more than just caring about your business.
We have to understand. You have to understand the customer and understand their drivers of what's going to move them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And sure, I mean, like we said, cost is an issue. It's an issue for everybody, right? But once you understand what motivates them or drives them, now we can have a real discussion.
All right, Jason, so I've got another question for you. Previously, we've had a discussion and we brought up the fact that cost is an issue for an apartment manager. And the interesting thing that I think about, and I've talked about this in other industries before, and I'm really interested to get your perspective on it. Is cost really an issue, or is this a baked-in idea that people have? Because the reality is the expense of pest control is such a small expense on a P&L compared to the other things these people think about. So do you think cost is really an issue, or do you think it's just baked into these people that they always have to reduce their cost?
Yeah. I think it's my personal opinion, is just my opinion. I think there is a stigma of it being, the race to the bottom. Certainly have heard other people talk about that. But what we've done to take the time is interview our property management clients and ask them, right? We brought in a third party and asked them, what are the criteria that you are looking for when choosing a vendor? Let's understand what they're looking for, right? Where do you think price or cost associated on the top 10 list? It was 6 or 7. Speed of service,
Really?
reputation, quality of work, communication. I mean, it was down on the list. So once you understand that and you can make your presentation based on that, it makes a big difference. I mean, and we talked about earlier, understanding what your client wants, right? If you don't understand that, I hate to say it, but good luck.
What you're speaking is the stuff I'm on my soapbox about for years is understand the requirement of the customer. Fair enough, right?
It's not just in this industry, it's in restaurants, universities, daycares. We got to understand that.
I love it, man. I love it. Obviously, we've been through all these ups and downs, the swings from an economic standpoint over the last couple of years. And so how do you think that the economy has affected the apartment industry specific to what we do?
Right. So I go back to 07, 08, 09, right? And depends on the diversity of your property management client. If they're 100% just in apartments, or are they into commercial as well, right? And so we had a particular client back then that was geared 50-50, 50 commercial and 50 on the property management side. Well, the property management side had cash, but they were pulling, the commercial side was pulling from the apartment. So they were trying to, string the vendors along while the commercial was suffering. So understanding what type of client you have, what is their risk on their portfolio. And then you fast forward that to, COVID, right? Certainly a trying time, big reports, vacancies are gonna, be 50%. That certainly wasn't, and I think this, I can only speak to my experience in the Midwest, that certainly wasn't the case.
Yeah.
We're watching lease renewals on our clients. I've seen, the CNN and the Foxes all talk about that it's catastrophe, but in reality, most of our clients might have experienced a 2 or 3% dip in that. I mean, it's very solid. So if we have an issue, the thing to take in mind, a consideration about renting is it's a credit score to them. If they're not going to live in a house and they're going to live in that apartment, that credit score is very, very important to the renter, right? And like I said, if something goes wrong with the apartment industry, we've got more issues than really what we're dealing with.
Yeah, it was interesting because going through this, and I can speak to Tampa, unrelated to pest control, but apartment rates skyrocketed through COVID, like they skyrocketed. And, to the point, because Tampa became incredibly popular because everyone from the Northeast ended up moving down here. And I can tell you this, is that our friends that run apartment companies today, they were putting up record numbers across the markets.
And we're seeing the same thing in the Midwest, obviously. Inflation started to hit, obviously, as well. So that had an increase.
Yep.
And you got to keep in mind, we went through, during COVID, we went through our price increase as well, So I've been working with Stuart. Shout out to Stuart and the boys over there. They've been fantastic. We need to, on a regular basis, be evaluating our cost and what's fair to pass along to our customers. And I've always said this, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but the people that are getting squeezed are the middle class, right?
Yep.
They're the renters that are getting an increase at the pump. They're getting an increase at the grocery store. They're getting an increase at the, every time they turn around, there's an increase, right? I mean, this inflation it's been tough. But as far as, is it a solid industry? I mean, I would say so. I mean, we're in a little bit different of a story. I mean, we've had, 35% growth, for the last 4 years running. So it's a little bit hard for me to gauge, I think probably what you're alluding to, but for us, it's been great.
So Jason, coming after a unique industry like you guys did and just niching down, I mean, even to the point where when we started working together, I was arguing we should look at some other industries and you adamantly told me no.
Right.
Let's think about when you started to develop your sales process, how did you start thinking about that and how did you put that together?
So initially, right, me not knowing what to do is me hire you, you go talk to them, you bring me back revenue, right?
Yep.
If you didn't hit it, either on or you're off, right? And my experience has been, I went through guys and some worked, some didn't work, and I would just get frustrated, right? And then I would put together what's called dad's sales steps of how to do it, right? And it was old school,
Which
right?
I've seen dad's sales steps, by the way, guys.
Yeah. But it worked, right? It got us from 0 to 10 million, but it's not going to be the steps that are going to take us from 10 to 50. It's just not the same. And when I talked to you, we talked about the enterprise system of making this so that a third grader can sell and developing those sales process so that when a new person comes in, they're easily trained a lot quicker so they can get out and produce, quite frankly, and that they have a toolbox that they can revert back to that says, hey, if we're not meeting our numbers or our quota, where in the pipeline are we failing, right? Or where can we help improve, or what resources can we add to help us with the sales process? Because obviously without growth, we're dead in the water. And if we're going to build a company to be $50 million, we better have these benchmarks and these metrics set in place. But more importantly, the people or the partners to help us get there, right? And I think that's been one of the biggest differences that I've noticed in working with you guys is I don't have to worry about it. I fought you a little bit in the beginning, and I've decided that I shouldn't be involved, and that's probably been pretty good. You've been working with my wife and our sales manager and our other sales consultant, but
love them, by the way.
Thank you. I'm really happy with where we are. We're kind of moving into phase 2, and really important for me.
It's been an amazing run for you guys so far, so it's cool. The very first time we sat down and we had this big discussion about all the information stuff that you had, is I did my best to convince you to get yourself a beautiful file management system.
Oh,
and you said to me, Seth, I've got a better system than anybody.
Yeah.
And you pulled out your phone and you're like, I built it all in Teams.
I
did. I went, this is batshit crazy.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's crazy. And when you said to me, ask me for anything, I asked you a random question, and in a split second, you delivered it. You're like, I have it right here.
Yeah.
To talk about this crazy idea you had to utilize a tool that's not used for file management.
Yeah.
And built this like remarkable file management system in Teams. Talk about it.
So, and this is going to get serious. So, in 2015, I had cancer, and had to go up to the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, get that taken care of. And I remember in my mind, I was minimizing the surgery. They were just going to open me up and scrape a little bit out. And then they take me down to the basement floor and they inject that radioactive dye in there, and it sees, where it could potentially go. And they're wheeling me up there, and I thought, oh, they're just going to open the door. And it's, when they opened up that door, there were probably a team of 8 doctors in there. Huge room, white, very white, 2 big 75-inch TVs up on the wall. And I'm like, oh shit, this is serious, right? They're got the anesthesia in there and anesthesiologist, and they're putting me out. I'm like, oh man, like, what are they going to find once they open it up? And I've got a divot inside my chest right here. I don't think I want to show everybody.
Yeah.
And I woke up out of that surgery and my arm was hurt, and I couldn't understand why my arm ached so much. They had to take 4 lymph nodes out of my armpit as well.
Oh.
And so got through that and recovering. And of course, I'm a ham, I use that, I got a bell, and I'm really hamming it up for my wife. And, she's like, all right, this is enough of this stuff, right? So fast forward a year later, I get cancer again. And so I'm really starting to, wonder, what am I doing here? What's my legacy? What's this worth? What happens to me if I die? How's my wife going to take care of the kids? What about my employees? What about my clients? And what helped me through that second recovery is I thought, I have to get everything out of my head and I have to write it down, right? I need this business to run without me here. So in that recovery process, I just started writing. And the first thing I did, Fat Pat will appreciate this, I sent him my giant playbook. It was about 3,000 pages. 2,000 was for the technical portion of it.
Yeah.
How do we, where do we park the car? What do we say when we get to the door? How do we do our inspection? How do we ask for the invoice? All that stuff. And the second part was, how do we actually run the business? What are we actually doing here? So if Seth comes to Karen after I die, what are you actually buying at Environmental Pest Management? What do I say when I answer the phone? How do I type into PestPack? What do I say into Pest Genius? All those things of how to run my business. What's a banking relationship? Like, where are the account numbers? What's my username and login? And so I took it from this giant 3,000-page playbook. And when Teams came, I'm like, oh, well, I'll just make it digital. I didn't understand. I didn't know anything about Teams. I'm like, I can have anything you can ask me about my business, I can find on my phone in about 3 clicks. And I think that's the way that it should be. So you can say, hey, Jason, what happens to your business if you pass away? We're going to go to Carpenter, Will, and Trust and Estates. We're going to open it up, and there's going to be this flow chart. You're going to say, this is what's supposed to happen if A, B, and C. Jason, what's your line of credit like? We're going to pull up finance. We're going to go line of credit. You're going to see term amount, balance. You're going to see payments. You're going to see who our contact is. You're going to say, hey, Jason, what's your sales playbook? I'm going to go team sales playbook. I'm going to go XYZ. How do we hire? What do we ask during the questions? So on and so forth. It's almost franchisable, but it's a complete system that I feel safe in passing down to the next generation, or eventually if we get acquired at some point way down the line, right? What are you actually buying if I'm not there? And that's how it started. Quite frankly, it was more about me than anything else. So when I shared that with you, you're like, oh, that's crazy. I'm like, I think it's pretty genius, actually.
Well, I remember because obviously my job is to find gaps, right? Like my job is to find gaps, make 1 out of 10 good decisions and help companies. And when I looked at it, I just remember when you were talking about it, we talked through it, I went, holy shit, like you literally just pulled up a random document in seconds.
Yeah.
Using a tool that's actually not designed to do it.
What did Pat say when you told him?
Yeah, he was like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
Like, is he crazy? Like, it was like that.
Yeah. You're like, he's not really crazy. It actually makes sense for him.
That's what I said to him. I said, Patrick, I go, this is what Jason does. And he went, that doesn't make any sense. And he goes, what do you think? And I go, no, it actually works. Yeah. And I said, I went on to the discussion and I said, listen, dude, I said, Microsoft probably actually doesn't understand how this actually worked. In all honesty, like it's probably not a use case really, you know?
Yeah, and then, you look at, you get to the size that we are, we're at 72 employees this year with 50 trucks. At the end of the year, we'll be 96 employees and 70 trucks. And so when you get into some of those, not my direct reports, but the reports underneath them, not that I need to manage it, but if my vice president gets smacked by a truck, I need to know where they left off, right? And so I think having that data available for anybody else in there, it's kind of like the New England Patriots, right? Like they got people, it's the next man up.
Yeah.
And how do we not get behind the 8 ball if our star quarterback goes down? How do we bring in Matt Castle or Garoppolo or any of those guys? And I'm not a New England fan, by the way, but I love the way that they run their organization, right? It's the next man up, and they've had can't argue with their dynasty, right? And I think that's a testament to the Crafts and whether you like them or not, Belichick and Brady.
I have another question kind of related to another thing I want to talk about, but one of the things that's very interesting for all you Patriots fans, all of us here in Tampa would like to thank you guys for our championships down here.
And we're close to the stadium too.
Yeah, we're a mile. Yeah. A mile. So we would like to thank
Baker Mayfield now. Right? Is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
He'll be all right. We're not going to get a championship, which is okay. And one of the other things related to this, which I actually was floored, it's a little different subject, is that when I started looking and started to understand your business, before we kind of got more engaged, is one of the things that I thought was very interesting that you keep is that when you onboard people, is that you actually not only just pair them up with different people in the departments, which I think is an incredible best practice, but you actually tell them the questions to ask the different people to better understand your business, which I thought is absolutely brilliant. I've never seen that done before.
So that was advice from Chip Hillary, our we'll call him a business consultant.
One of my favorite people, honestly. He's amazing.
Thank you. He's been amazing. It's something they did at his company when they sold. And that's something that we integrated into the process, which I think is, I never would have thought of it, but I thought that was interesting. The next thing that we're working on in conjunction to that is this video library database. One of the things that we're focused on is how quickly can we get them integrated into the team within reason, right? I don't want to rush someone through the process, but how can they recall? I mean, how much of the stuff do we remember in the second week of your job here, man? Like, and then if you have questions about it later, how easily can you recall, oh, this is what Seth was talking about when we're going to do shorts or reels or videos, and it's back in this database of, oh, that's what we were talking about, right? That's the next big push along with AI.
Yeah, so we actually do that as a company. So when the team members come on with us, they actually get videos describing from exactly my perspective the function of their job. And each step all the way through, everyone gets that when they come here.
And then to take it another step further, it's got to be updated annually. So when you guys started here a couple of years ago, it may be different now than what it was 2 years ago, right? And you got to put that on the annual roster to do, and it's never ending.
Yeah, it's cool.
But it's critical.
I thought it was remarkable, and I remember reading it, and I said, man, it made me take a step back to saying, if something is supposed to take 3 months, well, what does it take to make it happen in 2 weeks?
Right.
And it made me start to process that again, because it's a core belief that I have, is that if you're saying, oh, it always takes 3 months to onboard a CSR. Well, we challenged this a long time ago, and I said, well, I bet I can onboard a CSR in a month. And everyone's like, that's impossible, it's impossible. And I said, well, why? Why is it impossible? It's actually not. And so then the question is, well, if you could do it in a month, why couldn't you do it in 2 weeks, right? And I think you've probably done that through this process.
I think it ranges on size of company too, right?
sure.
If you've got 5 people, probably not going to take as long.
Yep.
Would be my guess. And some people have different appetites for how long they think it's. I'm not going to argue with someone that says, hey, I think it's going to take. I've got this process. I'm comfortable with it. I don't want anyone speaking to a client for 4 months. Okay, fine, right? I can't do that at our size, and I'm sure people that are larger than us probably don't want to do that. But we have a different operation at 10 than we do at a 500,000 or $1 million.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really variant per company.
That's cool, man. Well, I appreciate it, man.
Thanks.
Thank you.